First off, let's get real. I am not worried about AI taking my job overnight as a data analyst. My favorite example is looking at your Amazon recommendations. When was the last time that you bought one of those? Oh, wait. They have skin in the game and will use whatever is at their disposal, a machine learning, AI, whatever they can do to get you to spend money. And until those kind of recommendations are spot on, I'm not too worried. But what it will do, hopefully, is take some of those like small repetitive tasks that we have to do over and over to get to a point to do the analytic style work. Take them, please. That said, I use ChatGPT almost every day as an analyst. Warning, ChatGPT is all over the news, but ultimately it's just a natural language processing tool that takes a big old scrape of the web and then it makes you feel like you're talking to a real human. ChatGPT is not a human though, but it will talk to you as if it were, and it's going to do it with all the confidence of that kind of person that makes you feel like they know what they're talking about, but when you do any level of fact checking or critical thinking, they don't actually. That is ChatGPT. For example, I know that the data in it at this point when I'm recording this video is through like September of 2021. I didn't expect much, but I did ask, what should I cover in this video about how ChatGPT can help me as an analyst? It spouted nonsense. I didn't give it any context, so I didn't expect anything amazing out of it, but it actually generated garbage like ChatGPT can generate visuals. ChatGPT is text, it cannot generate visuals. And then it told me to use ChatGPT as an analyst to stay up to date with industry trends and software. And I'm like, wait, it goes through September of 2021. There is no up to date about what's happening in the industry. So of course I called it out and it's like, oh, sorry about that confusion. And then it came at me with a level of information that I would expect. And more importantly, it uses data that it's been fed. So when we're having these conversations with ChatGPT, it's using that for other conversations, so to speak. So do not load in proprietary information of any kind, whether it's a business idea, actual data, period. I'll go into how I get around this and how I still use ChatGPT when I get to the tips and tricks section. When to use ChatGPT. My rule of thumb is I use it whenever my brain just isn't functioning the way I want it to. And sometimes that looks like whenever I need some level of creativity that I'm just not feeling, or if I need to brainstorm solutions, or I've Googled my way through a problem that I'm just not able to solve. Or if I need to hone in on something that's not my sweet spot. I'm a data analyst. I'm not an expert marketer or a training person, but ultimately I find myself in a position where I need to do these other things as part of my role. So it's just known to like shake the cobwebs off of my brain, so to speak, so that way I can move forward with whatever I need to do and do it fast. So actual examples of how I use ChatGPT. ChatGPT stores your information as chat threads, essentially. So I went through for the last 6 months that I've been using it and it compiled this list. One of those ways that I use ChatGPT is if I'm having a persistent problem that I just can't Google my way through, I'll throw the question at ChatGPT. I have literally had it tell me wrong information, specifically on a Tableau problem that I was having. I had been working on this problem for off and on for weeks. I was able to get through it though just by asking ChatGPT, even with that wrong information, but just because it spurred another way of looking at the problem so that I was able to solve it. And you know those requests that you get on Monday morning at 9 a.m. and inevitably it's going to be a fire drill, but your brain isn't quite fully caffeinated at the time? This is another space that I've used ChatGPT. So if I've been given data, I can't think of what visual I want to pull out for it. That's where ChatGPT can go. And so while it can't generate a visual, and we don't share, actual data with ChatGPT that I'm using for my job, but I can kind of give it an idea of what I'm trying to accomplish and it'll give me ideas on where to go. And so it's not giving me the answer, it's giving me a path so that I don't have to spend too much time spinning wheels. It's kind of solves for that blank page idea whenever you're like, okay, now what? So I've used it for a sense of brainstorming. Like my current role, I don't have a lot of peers that do the same kind of work. So a lot of times I feel pretty isolated. And ChatGPT is like this odd cubicle mate that helps me overcome problems. And no, ChatGPT can't analyze your data for you because remember, that's secret private information that your company owns. But it can give you strategies and approaches like best practices for data visualization or data analytics ChatGPT is great at that still. And again, it's kind of spurring ideas more than solving your problems. I'm working on a new reporting package, and I really wanted to come up with a name for it, not feeling super inspired on what that would look like. And so I was able to give ChatGPT some thoughts around my project that are pretty loose and anonymized, but it gave me a list of ideas that I was able to turn into something useful. So it made it a lot of fun to create a poll to share with the work group and the broader team, so that there's a lot more ownership in the creation of this report, and ChatGPT was responsible for those names and the idea to ask for voting. Along the same lines, it can help with a communication plan. I'm a data analyst, not a communications expert. So sometimes I use it as that communications partner to deliver hard information, complex information, and things of that nature, where I stay in my sweet spot and can solicit help without having to actually pester another person on another side of the corporation that has no idea who I am. So communication and planning around communication, ChatGPT has shined for me. I'm a data analyst and a communications expert, but we're constantly communicating via email or project or the operation whenever we have to launch new things and ask for information. And so I use ChatGPT to help me out. And so that way I'm incorporating best practices from across the World Wide Web in order and incorporating that into my role so that I'm effectively a better communicator, hopefully. Same kind of idea. I use it to help me set up outlines for training. Again, I don't give it super specific information because I can't, but I can still have ChatGPT be a training expert and share best practices so that I can morph that into something whenever I'm getting ready to train and create new documentation around that. And just this week, I used ChatGPT to help me out with a color problem that I was having. I have a standard palette that I use within the team for a little bit of branding and understanding whenever somebody gets a new report. However, I needed more colors and I wasn't really sure where to go to incorporate the new colors while it still fits in with the accessibility concerns and still solves the problem that I was having. And so while ChatGPT is not literally giving me some visual, it's able to talk through options so that I could work through that color problem. So whenever I'm creating like a presentation or a dashboard, I have actually plugged in the information that is contained within it to some degree, again, not super specific here or anything, just to make sure that I'm actually covering the content and like other questions somebody might ask when presented this kind of information. And ChatGPT basically allows me to add an FAQ into what I'm providing or appendix information or what have you, so that I'm better prepared when it's time to go through the presentation or launch the dashboard or anything like that. And I also like to use it to help me documentation, like summarizing something. The thought here is that whenever I've already had this long thread of getting to a place where I'm ready to present or launch or share, whatever that looks like, I can take at the end of that thread and ask for a summary. And so then I can load that in, whether it be notes, so that way I can have a one-sentence explanation for what I was trying to accomplish. And it helps me clarify my message if this is something I'm literally presenting. Or it can be like in a help icon that I include on Tableau dashboards or something. That way somebody, when they approach the dashboard, they see that help icon, they can hover and they know what it is without me spending a lot of time having to do that kind of documentation. Tips and tricks. So for like that documentation conversation where I'm adding a summary in for like a dashboard, if I've already had a conversation with ChatGPT about the report that I'm creating, it already knows what I'm doing. So at the end, in that same thread, I try to keep within one thread if I can. I just ask it to summarize it at the end. So then all I have to do is plug and play, adjust where it makes sense to, because of course I didn't give it specifics, but then I'm able to like really churn out information that could be helpful for somebody without having to spend a lot of time thinking about it. It's really kind of a great kickstart by using one thread in order to keep building without having to re-anonymize everything that I'm doing and give it more context. Along the same lines, context is super important because it works best for me if I start a thread by saying, and I'm talking to ChatGPT here, you are a marketing expert. I've got to deliver a message to people that may not love the message that I'm sharing because it will add to their workload, and then give it the parameters of what I'm trying to accomplish. And so it comes at it from a different angle altogether. Another example is telling ChatGPT that you're a corporate training expert and using your best practices and expertise, give me a launch plan for new software within the organization, and kind of give it some more parameters. But it's all starting with your expertise is this thing that I am not an expert at. So again, it's not really going to give me verbatim. It's just generating ideas for me in a very organized way using best practices that exist somewhere on the internet for us to use. So sometimes this means I need to start a second thread if I don't really love the outcome, because because sometimes ChatGPT is too honed in on this one report that I'm creating versus, using that corporate trainer expertise. So sometimes I will take the summary that I create for a thread and then put it into a new thread. So it's like, you're an expert corporate trainer. I developed this report with that summary, and then now it's a kind of new thread, but it's still like layering in this corporate trainer expertise in this example so that I'm still able to get what I need without starting over from scratch. So sometimes if I can keep it to one thread, that's great. 2 threads, I really don't like moving to 3 unless I absolutely have to, just because it can get a little out of hand whenever you're looking for some of those old chats that you've had in the past. Actually going through and anonymizing isn't as hard as it sounds. Like if you are looking for a metric that is a dollar amount, say sales instead of the metric that you're trying to use. And geographic information is not proprietary in the context of I'm building a national report, and so a drill down to state, that's not something that you can't share. So I would put something to that effect, like I need to have a sales by state report, and then blah, 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 kind of give more of that context. So you're generically asking for information without having to share anything that's proprietary. So again, it's just a brainstorming tool. So as long as you're not sharing any specifics to the project, you're safe. So geographic stuff is safe, but then what if I need another type of dimension? Come up with a generic data set. So there's the generic data sets that tools use, Superstore data for Tableau, even the Titanic one that I feel like a lot of people learning Python and R will bring up. Use that, facilitate the conversation with ChatGPT while keeping above the line and making sure that you're not sharing anything that you're not supposed to. Comment below with your tips, tricks, and even other warnings so that you can help other analysts trying to work their magic using ChatGPT too.